It is time for another edition of the Fight HQ podcast. Of course, I'm Jason Floyd, always joined by the fighter, Pete Rogers Jr. We're here to break down UFC Vegas 103, goes down on Saturday inside the UFC Apex, of course, headlined by a flyweight matchup that was actually a replacement opponent. Of course, initially supposed to be Manel Kape and Brandon Royval. Royval pulls out of the fight, so Kape gets a new opponent for this fight card. And man, Pete, when I first started looking at this fight card, I knew this was Apex card just based on the co-main event. I don't understand. In 2025, how is, look, love Cody Brundage, love Julian Marquez, had great conversations about these guys. Mad respect to both these guys. This should not be a co-main event in 2025.
Yeah, no, it definitely shouldn't be. I mean, it could be a co-main event at a backyard brawl, but as far as in a UFC card, it makes no sense. I'm looking at these matchups and I'm like, yeah, I would have put Ribovics Haqparast as the co-main event. I mean, that's pretty evident as what should have been the co-main event. And then that puts both of them in a spot to shine off of each other to get some pump in the division. Haqparast is on a streak, and you like what Ribovics is doing, especially what he did against Daniel Zellhuber. So this being the co-main event, I mean, I think it makes no sense at all, other than the hopes of somebody gets finished.
The fight order makes no sense to me. Like, it just, How is Johnson Temirov the second fight of the night? That may be one of my more intriguing fights that gets me to the television set on Saturday.
Yeah, I agree. It makes no sense to me at all. It's almost like, how the people doing like the bracket challenge, and they have their dog pick who's going to win by taking the treats off of one page or another, and then that's how they pick their entire bracket. That's kind of how I think they matched this card, because it makes absolutely no sense. I mean, but regardless, we're here to break it down for you. A very, very volatile fight card. I mean, lots of untrustworthy candidates, fighters that you're surprised they're still in the octagon. But as you always say, it's cut season. So I think we could be seeing a lot of these fighters for the very last time inside the octagon. And I hope they go out there and they give a good account of themselves. But, man, it's a lot of volatility. And I'll have to see if you like some underdogs, or if you like some specific matchups similar to me or different than I do.
Of course, we do have our DraftKings contest. It is already active. The link to that contest is in the description. Also, we've got our Discord channel, totally free to join. Plus, we have the offer from Stochastic. Get 15% off any MMA package that they offer. All you got to do is you can click the links in the description, or you can just use the promo code FIGHTHQ to take advantage of that. Of course, speaking of DraftKings, what happened last week, if you were not on Austen Vanderford last week, you probably did not take down a contest. Austen Vanderford scoring 121 points. Looked absolutely amazing in that one. I thought one of the more interesting things with him post-fight saying, hey, I wanted this at 170. It was my opponent who pushed him after the fight, which you probably should be more upset with the referee, but seriously, bro, you were getting pummeled on the ground. As someone who had a sizable ticket on Austen Vanderford, by decision, referee, let him die. Let him die.
I don't understand. Just I get it. He was frustrated, and maybe he was thinking that he was defending himself because he was shelling up, but he was just absorbing the shots, and I think he was kind of stuck in position. But, last week we hit on some good underdogs. Vanderford came through for us. It was an intriguing card, but ultimately one that I didn't have the greatest success with. But, it was still a fun card to see our members do well with, and definitely get the Vanderford call correct.
Kudos to a lot of our members in Discord who were on Ricky Simon all week long. Javid Basharat, man, just a brutal KO. Now a guy that has now lost back-to-backs as massive favorites there. Ian Cutelaba going out there and getting that submission win. Your top three scorers last week were all underdogs, Vanderford, Simon, and Cutelaba. And one of the things, and I've talked about this, on this show and my other podcasts, is it seems like 2025 is kind of that year of these highly touted prospects either losing or not looking the best. And Abdul is one of those guys where nearly gets finished there in the opening round there. To me, and the guy you look at this week is going to be Mario Pinto as we kind of now move ahead to UFC Vegas 1-3, talking about our strategy for game theory for DFS. Look, on the main event, I think it's a really hard fight to avoid in terms of DFS, just because of it. On FanDuel, Brundage Marquez, I think, is a fight you've got a roster. If you're playing on FanDuel, their salary is at 14-13. DraftKings, and Pete was bringing up this really great point before the show, before we went live here, is Brundage could go out there, or one of these guys could go out there, look great in the first round, and then crap the bed in the second round. And because of the price point and maybe that ceiling could be with a second round finish, maybe they don't end up being optimal.
Yeah, you have to get different than the masses. And I tried creating a unique lineup last week, and for the most part, I maintain my picks, and I try to just get different on something where I think I'm going to have a ton of difference in ownership than most of the field. And I think that everybody's going to flock to this co-main event, and rightfully so, right? Because the likelihood is that somebody's getting finished between Brundage and Marquez. But in the event somebody doesn't, or in the event it's a come from behind win or something of that nature, or a low volume decision, maybe it's best to avoid it. And it's a contrarian approach, and it's one that has worked out for me a lot. And it's, in some other times I'm on the outside looking in because I avoided such chalk. I think that everybody's underdog of the week is going to be Cody Brundage, and I totally get it because of what Marquez has done the past 3 fights, getting knocked out the past 3 fights. Brundage being one of the most untrustworthy candidates to date inside the UFC. He has wins, but some of the wins are DQ wins or no contests. So I don't know if you can even trust him, but I will say that most likely this fight will have a ton of ownership. And in the event that it does not come through, I'm going to hope that me avoiding it works out for me.
Dylan in the chat asking if they're friends. Yes, they are friends. And
yes,
and this comment from Matt is just hilarious. Or no contest.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And that's that's the problem, right? Is you have a legitimate fight for round one foul occurs, and next thing we're milking it. Or next thing is it leads to some sort of controversy, and those are intangibles we cannot predict. But there is also a conversation to be had about the history between these two, and I'll kind of dive into that when the matchup comes up. But it's enough for me to say I'm not putting my money on that fight in most of my lineups. So I'm excited to see if you agree with me or disagree with me, and like always, we're happy to have you guys here joining us. If you can hit that like button, get us over 100 likes, help us get over 2,000 subscribers. We really do appreciate it.
That fight to me is, I really want to see where ownership's at on both guys. That is where, I will make my decision of how I want to go, depending on the contest that I'm getting in. I will say this, I feel like there's going to be 1 or 2 or 3 notable favorites that are going to crap the bed on this fight card. And one of the guys I'm looking at, and a lot of it has to do with who his head coach is. His head coach is Gilbert Melendez. Hyder Amil at 7,400 against William Gomis. That is one that sticks out to me. Haqparast as a noble underdog is another one that sticks out to me. I'll say this. I might just X out Andrea Lee and JJ Aldrich. I mean, I think we both know the fight's going 15 minutes.
Yeah. And that's one where I think there's definitely going to be more ownership a part of the co-main event than that fight. So that's an edge if, of course, the projections are incorrect, or the prediction of Cody and Julian tends to be a low volume affair. And that bout of Andrea Lee's final fight in the octagon, I would have to say, maybe that's an edge to have on the field, but the likelihood is that 15 minutes does happen.
Yeah. The crazy thing is she's lost 5 in a row. Get this. Now, before we get into breaking down the main event, I do want to mention a question that came in here via Twitter about last week from Scott saying, what's Austen Vanderfort's ceiling as a fighter? I can't handle him being better than a fringe top 15 guy because 170 is a Shark Tank. Pete, where my concern is when he can't get the fight to the ground. Can he win a striking matchup? That, to me, is going to be the question mark.
Yeah, I don't think he can't get the fight to the ground. I think his wrestling's that good. I think his grappling's that good. I think the team that he comes from is the best team in the world, an American top team.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen how these guys, I've been a part of that camp. I've seen how they train, and Steve Mako wrestling is fantastic. You got the best jiu-jitsu in the world at American top team because of everybody from Brazil, the best Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belts. There's like 50 black belts on the mat at all times. And now you have excellent strikers as well. I think that Vanderfort can dominate as long as he chooses the best path to victory, which is utilizing his wrestling. He could totally be a ranked fighter. I think he will be. And I think him going up against Gegard Mousasi was too much too soon. Gegard's a pretty talented grappler, but also just a better fighter, and built a career off of defending takedowns and brutalizing you. So I think a lot of people see, oh wow, he lost to Aaron Jeffrey and he lost to Gegard Mousasi prior to that. So this guy's not gonna materialize to anything in the octagon. I think at 170, absolutely he can, and I think that he has such overpowering wrestling, complemented with everything I said from American Top Team, that he just needs to fight smart and he can win. I mean, look what Bilal Muhammad has done. Look what Sean Brady has done. Excellent grapplers and wrestlers have an advantage over most of the division.
Yeah, I mean, to me, when you talk about those losses in Bellator for Vanderfort, they're at 185.
Right.
To me, he's a different guy. I think he is fit for 170. That's where he should be. And I think that's probably people around him have made that to him. I'm sure the coaches at American Top Team said, hey, you got to be at 170. I mean, one of his main training partners is Johnny Eblen. Facts. I mean, he's going against one of the best guys in the world, and I'm just waiting for when does Johnny Eblen ask for his release. I'm just waiting for that. That
room from 170 and 185 is ridiculous. Johnny Eblen, Dalton Rasta, Marvin Vittori's now down there, Vanderford. So it's like crazy.
Dude, yeah, that American Top Team room, yeah, that's it. It's a crazy room down there in Coconut Creek, and but let's get right into breaking this one down. UFC Vegas 103, of course, goes down on Saturday. Lock time currently 4 p.m. Eastern time, as we're going to go Manel Kape take on Almabayev. Almabayev is a plus 175 betting underdog, minus 210 for Manel. He is 9,000 on DK, $20 on FanDuel. Almabayev 7,200 on DK. And $14 on FanDuel. And one of the things that I was telling Pete before the show is, I think one of the questions I have about Almabayev is, what happens if this fight hits minute 16? And that's where I think we could see Manel really take over.
Yeah, I'm hearing a lot of people say that, and it's like, I get it. And, I think like Manel Kape is a guy who title fight aspirations, totally deserves it, had one of the hardest debut fights ever. Prepared for this time, for this fight date. You have Austen Almabayev stepping in on short notice, but he's already been preparing for a bout. So I don't think like it's a guy truly stepping in on short notice. I mean, he has a camp to him, and this is just an opportunity to, put yourself into title contention. And the problem I have with Manel Kape is how close he allows fights to be. I think skill for skill, his striking separates himself so much from the rest of the division. I mean, he's like a sniper on the outside. His boxing is awesome. His feints are great. His defensive wrestling has improved over the years, and because nobody wants to stand with him. So he is forced to defend takedowns and punish you on the feet. But in certain matchups, you do see Manel Kape let his hands go more. And in certain matchups, you see Manel Kape be a little gun shy or a little tentative, worried about the takedown. And I do think, like, in striking matchups, you see the true potential of Manel Kape. In matchups where he's going up against a wrestler, it's defense first, right? He does not want to get overextended and, vulnerable for takedowns. And I think that kind of makes fights a little closer. So, like, he tends to have pretty good strikes attempted per minute. And his significant strikes landed per minute are pretty sizable at 5.05. But I think you can take some off of that. I think there's some fat on that number because in matchups against takedown artists, I think it's scaled back. I think it's scaled back until he gets the timing and until he realizes, like, okay, I can truly defend these takedowns, because once he's taken down once, he's worried about it again, and that's the problem. Is I've seen Manel Kape in fights where I think he should look -2, -300. And I'm just like, oh man, like, he's not necessarily playing with his food, but it's like a thin margin fighter. So for me, I see that 9,000 price tag. I see a flyweight bout. I say, okay, well, most likely it's going to go the distance. Most likely flyweight bouts go the distance. Getting finishes in the flyweight division is a rare occurrence. They do happen. Manel Kape has the power and the striking to have it happen. His opponent, Austen Almabayev, has excellent wrestling and submission skills. So there's a world where Austen Almabayev can get a submission win over Manel Kape. I think the percentage of a finish happening is slim. I do agree that, the championship rounds are kind of like uncharted territory for Austen Almabayev in the UFC. And I think that, you can go back and look at the regional career of Austen Almabayev and say, okay, he has been 5 rounds in the past. It's some time ago, but normally he's in the driver's seat. So how does he respond to some adversity? We've seen more from Manel Kape when things don't necessarily go to his game plan. And the striking is definitely better than Austen Almabayev. But Almabayev, I think, because of the takedown threat, can make this look a lot closer. Because when we combine just activity and looking at my algorithm, as I did last week, which it worked out again, but I'm still trying to figure this thing out when it comes to like predicting finishes and trying to balance my own insight. I think the strikes attempted and takedowns attempted, not necessarily landed, but I think just the activity can make the optics of this fight appear closer than it may be. And that's a typical Manel Kape fight. So it's a salary play for me. So like for salary wise, I don't know how I'm going to avoid Austen Almabayev at 7,200. I'm going to have plenty of him. He's a 21-2 flyweight fighter with a wrestling advantage, with a submission advantage over Manel Kape in 5-round territory, with a division that doesn't necessarily finish at the highest clip. He's going up against a better striker in Manel Kape, yes. But this is a fight where I would expect Austen Almabayev, if he wants to be victorious, Jason, he has to shoot 20 takedowns. I have to tell you. If it goes 25 minutes, he has to shoot 20 takedowns. And he has to hope to get 4 of them. He has to get 4 or 5 takedowns in hopes of being successful. And I really think he has that work rate about him. 20 takedowns sounds like a lot, but he does have that potential. He really does. And I think he could even surpass that amount, like 30 takedowns attempted. It sounds crazy, but in a 25-minute flyweight bout, I really don't think it is. These guys are some of the best athletes in the world, and it's a very competitive division. So it's a long-winded way of me saying, for salary-wise, I love Austen Almabayev at 7,200. I don't love Manel Kape at 9,000 for DFS. If you look back, he hasn't been the best DFS productive fighter out there. Only once did he score excellent at 131.5 against Zhalgas Zhumagulov. Outside of that, non-optimal scores. So the pick of the fight, I think that we will see Manel Kape edge him out 3 rounds to 2 with the damage criteria in intact. But I think even in a loss, Jason, the path to victory of Austen Almabayev could make him optimal here at 7,200 in a loss if it goes 25 minutes. So I'm going to be picking Manel Kape to win the fight, but I will be playing Austen Almabayev for fantasy.
Well, I mean, also you think about if this thing goes 25 minutes, potentially of, maybe say he loses a 25-minute decision, but let's say he goes out there and gets you 40 points, 50 points. Yeah. And all of a sudden that makes that line construction. I know when I was developing my first lineup, I was definitely kind of struggling with some of these underdogs this one. And one thing I do want to mention that you brought up right at the beginning when you started breaking down this fight, this is actually the 3rd opponent for Almabayev on this fight card. He was initially supposed to take on Steve Erceg, no longer on this fight card. He's now taking on Brandon Royval on the fight night card that's going to be in Mexico City. And then he was supposed to take on Alan Nascimento, and of course that's when they pulled him from the Nascimento fight and put him here into the main event. And one of the things I do believe is I think it's a good probability that Manel Kape is fighting potentially his next fight being for the UFC flyweight title. Now our co-main event is Cody Brundage taking on Julian Marquez. Julian Marquez is a -140 betting favorite, plus 120 for Brundage. Brundage is 7,700 DK, $13 on FanDuel. Marquez 8,500 on DK. And $14 on FanDuel. Of course, you have Cody Brundage coming off that no contest against Abdulrazak Alhassan back in July of 2024. This is actually his second opponent on this fight card. Initially, he was supposed to take on Ryan Loder. When you look at Julian Marquez, he's lost 3 in a row. All of them come in the first or second round via TKO. His last fight back in June was a 22nd loss against Zacharias. Hasn't won a fight since 2021, and this is a guy that has been around to multiple gyms over the past couple of years. He was at Glory, then at Extreme Couture, then he was at Factory X, which of course trained with Cody Brundage, and now over at the MMA Lab. And you brought up a point earlier in the show of, training is one thing, fighting is another thing. And there may be psychologically one of these guys maybe has a little good feeling, but I just sit there and say is like, how do you trust either one of these guys?
Yeah, you don't. You don't. So let me lay out the intangibles between Julian Marquez and Cody Brundage, because we can look at the facts. The intangibles, they're friends. They follow each other on Instagram and social media. They weren't just training partners. They consider each other friends. They have a history of training with each other for an extended period of time. So it's not like they got a couple looks in the gym. They both talked about it in their interviews in media, about how they both know what each other are good at and what each other struggle at. And they both know what to expect with each other. So right off the bat, it kind of limits my expectations for this fight, especially because they're friendly and especially because they have a long history of training with each other. Now, from the sounds of it, it does sound like Julian Marquez was quite surprised that Cody Brundage accepted the fight. He reached out to Cody and said, "You accepted the fight?" And Cody said, "Yeah." So then Julian says, "Okay." Now, granted, this is all based on the media discussions at Media Day. Cody Brundage talks about it and says, well, the way I looked at it is this is the last fight on my contract. I'm in a position where I can't say no. I was supposed to fight what's the wrestler from American Top Team who was on The Ultimate Fighter? Ryan Holder? Is that a fighter?
Holder, yeah. L-O-D-E-R.
Yeah. So he was supposed to fight him, and then that fell out, so they gave him a replacement of Julian Marquez. He goes, well, I'm not in a position to necessarily turn down fights. I'm on the last fight of my deal. Look at how my previous fights went. Julian Marquez isn't in a position to turn down fights either. Lost 3 fights in a row. They're going to have to put this personal relationship aside and handle business in the octagon. Now, let me tell you, that's a lot easier said than done. I haven't had a particular experience with this, but I know people that have, and it's a struggle, right? Especially if you are friends. There's always somebody that has an edge and is going to be less friendly in the fight. Now, I think that Cody Brundage probably knows that he has a path to victory here over Julian Marquez. I think he notices that it's a winnable fight, right? Like, we've seen Marquez get finished in 3 fights. In the training room, Marquez alluded to, not necessarily trying the hardest, but trying to work on things and trying to develop each day. So this isn't going to be practice. And him saying that, it sounds like Cody Brundage kind of has his way with him in the takedown department. I worry about Marquez getting pounded out on the mat. I don't necessarily worry about him getting submitted as much because I think Marquez has the better jiu-jitsu. I think that all the signs point to everybody's going to be on the under and magically the over hits. Or the fight goes the distance. I just see too many question marks surrounding it. I mean, you got 2 of the most volatile fighters out there. They're both, due for a win, or not necessarily due for a win. They both really want a victory. I think they may play it safe. I actually think they might be a little scared of what the other presents itself. I can see this being one of 2 things: being a low volume, competitive fight that goes 15 minutes and really disappoints everybody out there. Or I could see this being Cody Brundage has his way as he did in the training room, takes down Julian Marquez, puts him in a bad spot. I do worry about him pounding out Julian Marquez. But if the going gets tough, I know I can count on Julian Marquez way more than Cody Brundage. So if Marquez survives an early storm, I think that just like history has repeated itself and probably will here, that he has a lot of come from behind victories. And I can see him getting dominated early and coming from behind with a fatigued entire Cody Brundage and locking up a submission from the front headlock series, whether that's a guillotine, whether that's a Darce, whether that's an anaconda choke. He's very sneaky and he hunts it often. So in other words, I just don't trust this fight, right? Like, I think that Cody Brundage in a 150 max needs to be one of the most exposed underdogs on the slate. I get it. I also think that, Julian Marquez is probably in a good position to pick up a good score if he wins. But I think there's a 20% chance that this fight flops. I really do. And I think that there could be an edge of targeting a different fight over this fight. So for me, I don't want to waste my money on this fight in a single entry fight. I think I'm going to pivot somewhere else. I can't trust Brundage, who doesn't really have a true victory in a very long time. Always amid controversy. There could be a low blow. There could be an eye poke. There could be a shot to the back of the head. And all of a sudden, what should be a finish in this bout turns into a no contest or turns into a DQ. There's too many intangibles for me to want to get behind this. I'm going to pick Marquez to submit Cody Brundage later in the fight, but I totally get if you think Cody Brundage knocks out Julian Marquez with ground and pound in round one.
Yeah, looking over at FanDuel Sportsbook, the over 1.5 rounds plus 114. For me, it's just, it's tough to trust Cody just in terms of what we've seen with the fight IQ in situations. But I do see a clear advantage for him with the wrestling here, and it's just a fight that if you're rostering it, you're not going to feel good either way. And kind of go back on a point you were talking about of kind of how this fight could play out is both these guys know they're fighting for their UFC job. Whoever loses is getting cut. Let's just call it what it is. I mean,
they might both get cut. Let's be real.
Yeah, very true. The UFC may just say, I mean, hey, Cody, if Cody wins, they may not offer him a new contract.
Right.
And that happens.
Right. That's all it is. They may just not re-sign him. And if it's not a finish and it's not a good performance, I can kind of see that happening.
Yeah, it's just a fight that I will say this on FanDuel, I think it's hard to avoid. If you're playing on FanDuel, just because of the salaries at 14 and 13, it's hard to avoid.
You know what this fight reminds me of? This fight reminds me of NASCAR DFS. Roster it and walk away. You know what I mean? Just like, don't watch the race. Don't watch the fight. If you got enough money to be playing on 150 max, play the fight. Don't watch it. Don't even look at your lineups because all chaos is going to ensue in this fight. And it could be for good. It could be for bad. And it could lead to both fighters flopping in a situation like this.
Oh, no doubt about it. Nobody, you're not going to feel good about yourself. I mean, you're just not going to feel good. I mean, that's the best way to put it. Next up, we got Estevan Ribovics taking on Nasrat Haqparast. Haqparast, a plus 240 betting underdog, minus 300 for Ribovics. He is 9,100 DK, $18 on FanDuel. Haqparast, 7,100 DK, and $11 on FanDuel. To me, I don't know if you feel the same way on this. I think this line is way too wide. I think the fight should be a closer than what it is. Of course, Haqparast, 9-4 in the UFC. 10 of his 13 fights in the UFC have gone the distance. He trains at TriStar. He's been alongside Rob Font and Calvin Kattar, as, of course, they've been preparing for their matchups each over the last 2 weeks. We have not seen him since June when he got that win there against Jared Gordon. Very quietly has won 4 in a row. Of course, Ribovics, he's won 3 straight since dropping his UFC debut in 2023, and he is coming off that win against Daniel Zellhuber back in September.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of recency bias baked into the line, right? Like, because we saw what Ribovics did in his most recent bout against Daniel Zellhuber, and that was a fantastic fight, right? Like, that was a fight of the night contender. They both hurt each other often throughout the bout. He nearly had Zellhuber out of there, lands crazy boxing combinations, had Zellhuber on skates, just really elevated his stock. And I know that Roy Jones Jr. became a huge fan of Estevan Ribovics. Ribovics was the underdog there at 7,200 against Daniel Zellhuber. Prior to that, knocked out Terrence McKinney with a beautiful combination into a head kick in round 1. Beat Camwella Kirk, but it was a competitive fight, and I think a lot of people don't necessarily remember that too much. So twice he scored 92, and once he scored 127. His debut against Loic Rojabov, he scored 48. And the issue in that bout was the takedown defense, right? Like, you get taken down and got back up, but the takedown threat is what made that fight a lot closer. I don't necessarily think that Nasrat Haqparast is going to go to the takedown well. He should, to make this fight a little bit closer. I mean, he has taken down John McDessie twice, and had 3 takedowns total in the UFC, but that's not really his game. He's a better boxer and striker than most people. I don't think that he hits as hard as Esteban Ribovics. I think early he could hit equally as hard, but he tends to fade. And I think that Nasrat Haqparast showed some vulnerabilities recently against Jared Gordon, which ultimately could have been a win for Jared Gordon, and might have, or it probably should have been a win for Jared Gordon. I think that Nasrat has fought some tough competition, 13 UFC fights compared to Esteban Ribovics' 4. Naturally, I think that there's a lot of recency bias baked into this line, and my model likes Nasrat Haqparast a lot as a dog. The issue I will tell you is that, like, I think there's something that I can't account for in the model, and that's power. And Ribovics really has that power to shut the lights out of Nasrat Haqparast, and I think that he can get Nasrat out of there as the fight goes on. I mean, I saw Nasrat not necessarily breaking, but not dealing with the pressure of Jared Gordon as well as I would have liked to see, because if Esteban Ribovics is in that situation and trying to replicate what Jared Gordon was doing, I think he cooks him. I think he gets him out of there. So I think that the line is a little wide. I understand that if this goes 15 minutes, you could have a great underdog here at 7,100, Nasrat Haqparast, scoring pretty well in a win, in a loss. He might even score 50, maybe 60 points in a loss because of high volume striking affair if he's able to avoid the power. We've seen him land 171 significant strikes, 146 significant strikes en route to 2 decisions, 99 and 90. I just don't know if I could, if that there's some intangible here where I just see Esteban Ribovics finishing Nasrat Haqparast. And maybe I'm kind of overvaluing his power, but I'm going to be picking Esteban Ribovics. I do think the line is a little wide, but I do like the upside of Ribovics here. He's already been in a really tough fight, and I think when the going gets tough, I can count on Ribovics to bite down on that mouthpiece a little bit more than Nasrat Haqparast, and I think that he can actually finish Haqparast in round 2 or round 3. So give me Esteban Ribovics here, but I recognize that there is value on the line of Nasrat at 7,100.
Yeah, Nasrat, I just think this fight's just closer than what we have, whether we're talking about the betting lines or also on the salaries. Like, if you tell me one 9,000 fighter loses, it wouldn't be. I might say I would probably pick Ribovics as the guy who potentially loses there. I mean, you're taking on a vet who's been in there, but Ribovics. I mean, look, should he be the favorite? No question about it. I think the fight's closer than what the lines say here. Next up, we got Hyder Amil taking on William Gomis. Gomis a minus 195 betting favorite, plus 165 for Hyder Amil. He was 7,400 DK, $14 on FanDuel. Gomis, 8,800 on DK and $17 on FanDuel. Of course, mention about Hyder Amil comes out of that El Nino Training Center under Gilbert Melendez. He's 2-0 in the UFC, coming off a 65-second win back in July. Gomis 4-0 in the UFC. 3 of those 4 wins have come by decision, and he is coming off a split decision win in his last matchup against Joe Anderson Brito.
Yeah, I think that this is a complete, like, 2 opposite ends of the spectrum of styles. I mean, William Gomis is a matador, and Hyder Amil is truly a bull. I mean, he has one direction, and that's forward. I think that he's the more exciting fighter, clearly, but I think that in a fight like William Gomis will bring to him, I think he's going to struggle. I think he's going to be hitting air a lot. I don't think he's got the footwork to necessarily deal with William Gomis. I think the feints, the fakes, the bouncing, the nice elusiveness of William Gomis will be enough to avoid these big barrages and blitz from Hyder Amil. And I actually think it could lead to a surprising KO for William Gomis if Hyder overextends and really just gets frustrated. So I recognize that I think everybody's going to want to play Hyder Amil from his box score, and I think it's a mistake this week because at 7,400, the guy averages 119 fantasy points, blew the doors off of Garcia at 131.8, got Lee out of there really quickly, got 106.8. He's 10-0. But if you go back and you watch some regional tape on him as well, I think he could be figured out. And I really do think that William Gomis going up against Joe Anderson Brito prepares you better for Hyder Amil than anything Hyder Amil has done. So I think like we know Gomis can take a shot. I just don't want him staying there and fighting the Hyder fight. I want him fighting the William Gomis fight. So you never know how fights are, right? So a person could be sucked into somebody else's style. Gomis could try to bang with the banger, and that could be a terrible, terrible route or path to victory. Hyder Amil trying to point fight William Gomis is not going to work either. And when the true styles clash, I think the Matador will defeat the Bull here. So I think that William Gomis will just kind of dance on the outside and route to a decisive decision over Hyder Amil. I'm not buying the underdog of Hyder Amil this week. I know plenty of people will be. I could be completely wrong also, but I just think that the fight IQ of William Gomis, the professional style of William Gomis, makes me want to pick him more than Hyder Amil. He's got that amateur energy out there of just like one speed, and I think that we've already seen Gomis prove that he's levels above fighters like that. Francis Marshall, Jarno Aarons, Joe Anderson Brito, and I could be dead wrong, but I think that Gomis goes out there and makes it look like a pretty easy fight.
Yeah, I mean, when I'm searching for underdogs, Hyder Amil is one of those underdogs I was searching for. I mean, just when I was, developing, my line just for Fight HQ, just to, get that contest up and going. And, I was really trying to avoid the go-main event, even though, like, I had, I was down that last fighter. I'm like, man, do I really want to go Cody Brundage? I mean, that's kind of, where, and I'm sure that's going to be something I'm going to battle about over the next 2 days or so. Next up, we got Danny Barlow taking on Sam Patterson. Patterson, a plus 240 betting underdog, minus 300 for Danny Barlow. Barlow, 9,200 DK, $19 on FanDuel. Patterson, 7,000 on DK. And $10 on FanDuel. Barlow 2-0 in the UFC, coming off a decision win against Nikolai in his last matchup. Patterson's won back-to-back fights after dropping his UFC debut. Both those wins, by the way, did come in the first round via submission. And the last one was against Kiefer Crosby, where he scored a arm triangle choke submission back in July of last year, Pete.
Yeah, I think this fight's an awesome fight, right? You have a former 155-pound fighter and Sam Patterson, looking to stay in the welterweight division and go up against a true welterweight that's actually skilled in Danny Barlow. You have Danny Barlow with the craziest left hand out there. He really reminds me a lot of oh my gosh, what's his name? Name escaped me right now. But he had Jeff Neal. He reminds me a lot of Jeff Neal because that crazy left hand, good southpaw. When he hits people, they get hurt. They start seeing stars, and he needs to defend takedowns and just completely just pick people apart with that beautiful, beautiful backhand, and has pretty good accuracy, just like Jeff Neal does. I think that this is a clash of styles. Sam Patterson has this tall guy defense. Leans back, super straight up, super susceptible to big shots. We've seen him get knocked out in the past. Yanal Ashmouz has knocked him out pretty bad. He was also knocked out in the regional scene a long time ago. But if Sam Patterson can make this into a true mixed martial arts fight and blend the styles and attempt to grapple Danny Barlow, Sam Patterson has some of the best front choke series out there. He really hunts a high elbow guillotine very nicely. He's very smooth with his transitions from the front headlock series. And I really like how he goes to the well over and over and over. The issue is I don't think Danny Barlow is going to be, looking to change levels and take him down. So there's a situation where Barlow could get exposed here. We're not entirely sure how Barlow's skills are on the mat. Haven't really seen all that much tape, in that department. I have seen him take people down. I have seen him get, submit people. I have seen him get back to his feet, but I think I would love to see him put in a bad position and see how he deals with it. But I really don't think it's going to get to that point. Like, I think Sam Patterson is going to get clipped on his way in. I think Barlow's far too accurate, and a lot of people are going to be low on Barlow's previous performance where he broke his left hand, and I think broke his arm in the same fight too. So it's like, and he still went out there and he picked up a decision over Veretennikov, and people will be like, well, Veretennikov got smoked last week against Vanderford. Clash of styles, man. Clash of styles. And I do think that Sam Patterson, just being tall and being a pretty long fighter, it's not going to translate physically like it's normally used. Like he's used to having a physically imposing threat on his opponents at 155 pounds. I think Barlow is a pretty athletic guy. He can get out of positions. And I think he's going to knock out Sam Patterson. But I do recognize that there are some unknowns surrounding Danny Barlow on the mat. Sam Patterson's a good striker offensively. Just defensively, I don't trust him to not get knocked out. So give me Danny Barlow to knock out Sam Patterson. Bad, not necessarily bad chin, but susceptible chin against crazy, crazy power. I got to go with the power of Danny Barlow to come through with this one. But this is a fight I think is one we need to target. So give me Barlow at 9,200.
Yeah, also, I think this is one that maybe if you want to go prop game hunting, prop some, finishes in terms of that one. Obviously, Barlow, being able to finish would be a TKO KO. Maybe Patterson, maybe look for those submission props with him in terms of that one. Next up, we got a heavyweight matchup. Austen Lane taking on the debuting fighter here, Mario Pinto. Pinto, a 5-1 betting favorite, plus 350 for Lane. Lane, $6,900 on DK, $9 on FanDuel. Mario, $9,300 on DK. And $21 on FanDuel. Austen Lane 1-2 with a 1-no contest in the UFC. Both of his losses in the UFC have come by TKO and KO. Mentioned about Mario, it's his UFC debut. Won on the Contender Series last year, and he's a rarity for this division, Pete. He's 26 years old. He's like 5, 6, 7, 8 years away from being his prime as a heavyweight.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing with the heavyweight division. You could be a lot older and succeed. At the higher up in weight you go, you can be older. And I do worry about some of these Dana White Contender Series fighters coming in here with hype, coming in here with inflated lines, coming in here with not as much experience as the veteran. I think Austen Lane, I don't think he's a good heavyweight by any means, but I think that he is somewhat battle-tested. I mean, he's fought Justin Tafa twice, Jonathan Deniz, Rebellis de Spain, picked up a victory there. He was able to beat Juan Adams in round 4 back in 2021. And outside of that, he was also the same guy that got knocked out against Greg Hardy. But in every single defeat, he's been finished. And he's been knocked out 4 times in round 1 and once in round 2. And I don't think he's going up against a guy in Mario Pinto who has obvious holes in his game. I think that he lacks experience, sure, but he's young. This is a heavyweight that has been the distance. He's been the distance 1, 2, 3 times as a pro. So I think that's pretty telling that Pinto can handle himself for 15 minutes. Not only that, he's a very good striker, and I actually think that he has some takedowns in his own right. I don't think he's the stronger fighter in this situation. I think the physical factor, the physicality will lie with Austen Lane early, but similar to how all Austen Lane fights go, I think that he tends to fade as the fight gets stretched out. Austen Lane has been the distance once, but that was against Rebellis de Spain. He laid on top of a striker, so he was able to pull that off. I don't think that he's going to be able to do that against Mario Pinto. I think that Pinto, if he gets taken down, will work, and he will make Austen Lane, exert cardio, just test him in all areas. And I think that Pinto is pretty well rounded for a guy as young as he is. I don't think he's going to blow the doors off with like a crazy introduction, but I think it might be a well-rounded performance where people are like, this Pinto guy is pretty good. So give me Pinto here to finish Austen Lane in round 2 or round 3. And I think he's going to have to deal with some adversity in round 1. Competitive striking, might get taken down, might get held up against the cage. But I do think that Pinto solves the Austen Lane equation. I don't blame people for wanting to fade Dana White Contender Series fighters, but I'm not the biggest Austen Lane guy. I'm just not, especially if you can't get the takedowns.
Yeah, I mean, look, we saw it happen in that last matchup. I mean, and Despain is now in Karate Combat, which I think Karate Combat has a show this week. I think
so. Do. I don't know. I'm pretty bad at following that, but I do really like Karate Combat. I really do. I enjoy it.
Oh yeah. And a lot of their stuff's on YouTube. It's really enjoyable. I mean, if you you like karate, I mean, it's great to, and it's unique with the pit thing, the way they have it. It's a unique setup. And Despain. I mean, I know he's in the GFL now, which
all these matchups and no fight date. It's the weirdest thing in the world.
Yeah, it's
almost like fantasy. I think they're just playing fantasy over there. They drafted a fantasy MMA squad. And now they're just putting out just ridiculous fights that'll never happen.
Dude, the fact that they are giving Fabricio Verdum a fight is still the craziest thing in the world. You want to talk about promoters not giving a crap about fighters? Prime example. Dude is in the antitrust lawsuit, he talked about his brain issues that he's having, going these treatments. If any United States commission regulates Fabricio Verdum, they should be brought up on charges.
Wow.
Bro,
yeah, especially if he's not fabricating, right? I mean, like, Jesus Christ.
Yeah. I mean, like, you literally testified to your brain issues, and we have a promoter who wants to give him a fight. It is unfortunately the extremely sad part about combat sports is that there's always going to be a promoter out there that if they think they can get any money out of you, they don't give a crap about your long-term health. I mean, it's
dirty business, bro.
Look, we all know fighting is not good for your long-term health. Okay. Yeah. It's just not, but it is. Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, who the hell wants to see Chris Weidman versus Luke Rockhold?
I want to see all these matchups. I'm telling you right now, I want to see all these matchups.
God, you're sick.
I don't think none of them happen, so I don't think we ever have to worry about it.
We'll exactly see if they ever do happen there. Next up, we got Ricardo Ramos taking on Chepe Mariscal. Mariscal is a minus 575 betting favorite, plus 385 for Ramos, who's 6,800 on DK, $8 on FanDuel. Chepe 9,400 DK. And $22 on FanDuel. Chepe 4-0 in the UFC. 3 of those wins have come by decision. He's coming off a unanimous decision win against Damon Jackson back in August. Most notably, he missed weight by 3.5 pounds in that matchup. Ricardo Ramos, 8-5 in the UFC. 5 of his 8 wins have come via decision, coming off a split decision win against Josh Kulbau back in August. Prior to his last fight, he had lost back-to-back fights via first-round guillotine. And when I was going down that Instagram rabbit hole, something really stuck out to me about Ricardo Ramos as he had made that transition over to Team Alpha Male, but there was a picture where he was training with the Fighting Nerds.
Yeah, I ain't considering him a fighting nerd fighter, though. I'm just not. I'm just not. Like, I fell into that trap with a few people. I want homegrown fighting nerds fighters in order to, like, I want Carlos Prates, Gene Silva. I'm sure there's a few more that I'm missing, but I don't know. Like, it's definitely something that made me pause and say, oh, crap, because that's 2 things that I like in this fight for Ricardo Ramos. The algorithm likes Ricardo Ramos a lot. And then I like seeing the fact that he is a part of the Fighting Nerds. But my optics in fight film, I just can't do it. I cannot do it, man, because you have a guy who has the most unbreakable spirit in Chepe Mariscal going up against the most breakable spirit in Ricardo Ramos. And you have a guy in Chepe Mariscal who trains at elevation, comes in there as a complete workhorse. Look what he did to Damon Jackson. I mean, I haven't been that off on a fight prediction in a very long time. And friend of the show, Damon Jackson, my God, that was one-way traffic. 5 takedowns, 2 reversals, 8.5 minutes of control time, en route to 138.5 fantasy points. He dominated. He destroyed Damon Jackson in that fight. So, I think there's a lot of recency bias baked into this price and to this betting line of Chepe Mariscal. And I think everybody, the value community is going to be looking at Ricardo Ramos. And let me tell you, if it's single-digit ownership, I'm doubling it if I'm playing a 150 max, because skill for skill, I think that he is equally as skilled as Chepe Mariscal, if not better and more skilled than Chepe Mariscal. But the better fighter doesn't always win. It's the guy who can dig deep when the tough gets going. And it's like, I think that the corner that Chepe Mariscal has turned is ridiculous because like I think that he's turned into an absolute force. His judo, his wrestling, his pace, his aggression, his boxing's good. Yeah, he got knocked out against Joe Anderson Brito on the regional scene, but I think like he took a very, very long path to the UFC, and he's fought very, very tough competition. And I think that he has every single time when he steps onto the, steps into the cage, I think he has slate breaking potential. He's done it. He really has done it. 138.5 fantasy points, 105, 108, and 84.9. And Morgan Charrier is very, very talented, and he still beat Morgan Charrier. Very close fight. So, like, I want to pick Ricardo Ramos because I want my algorithm to be correct, but a lot of the algorithm is basing it off the history of what Ricardo Ramos used to be. I mean, this guy doesn't have the best, KO power at all, outside of 2 spinning elbows. He's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt who has some pretty good takedowns. But then he gets guillotine choked twice. And he got guillotine choke against Julian Arosa and Charles Jourdain. 2 guys that, Juicy J likes to grapple, but like guys that tend to brawl and strike a lot more and defensively grapple. So I can't get behind Ricardo Ramos here. I think, Father Time's undefeated. And despite the changes, I'm still picking Chepe Mariscal. I am. I think that he cooks Ricardo Ramos in round 2 or round 3. After maybe Ricardo Ramos looks good, but then in every Ricardo Ramos fight, I think he's going to break. And he might break a little later because of the changes, but I think ultimately the same thing's going to happen. So give me Chepe Mariscal inside the distance.
One thing I've always respected about Chepe is something I don't think we necessarily really are seeing now in regional MMA is the willingness to take on tough fights on the regional scene. You really don't see that anymore. And this is a guy, and you mentioned about it, he took a long road to get here, and because just go to Tapology and just look at the names that he has fought. Gregor Gillespie, Bryce Mitchell, Pat Sabatini, Yusuf Zalal. I mean, the list goes on and on of guys that made it to the UFC. I like Chepe here. It's just, to me, it becomes that price point of whether or not he's going to be optimal at 9,400 or not in terms of that one. But I do like Chepe to go out there and get the win. And I think everyone's going to be Gene Silva fans next month against Bryce Mitchell.
Yeah, I retweeted. I said justice. And I hope justice is served.
Guarantee you, when he made that call out last weekend, Mick and Sean looked at each other and go, like that. Yeah, I guarantee it. They probably said the day of text, let's draw the contract up right now.
Yeah, I mean, before somebody has a second, before they second guess it, just in a change in opinion, get that fight booked.
And then I think you'll win if and when Silva wins that matchup. I think you'll quickly see that Bryce Mitchell gets cut by the UFC.
I would hope so. See you later.
That is going to be their way to get rid of him. Next up, we got a bantamweight matchup of Douglas Silva de Andrade taking on John Castaneda. Castaneda is minus 300 betting favorite, plus 240 for Silva de Andrade, who's 7,300 DK, $11 on FanDuel. Castaneda, 8,900 DK. And $19 on FanDuel. Castaneda has been up and down in the UFC, 4-3 in the UFC. 4 of his 7 fights in the UFC have gone the distance. He's coming off a decision loss against Daniel Marcos back there in June. For Douglas Silva de Andrade, he's alternating wins and losses in his last 4 fights. He's coming off a decision loss against Miles John back in June. His last 3 fights have gone the distance, and I made this point to Pete right before the show. I go, can you really trust a 39-year-old bantamweight?
Yeah, no, you can't. This is a fight where I think that John Castaneda is an excellent fighter for the division. I really, really like the skill set that he has. I think he has very, very good hands. I think that he has pretty solid wrestling. And I think that his jiu-jitsu is probably his best asset next to his hands. I think that Castaneda, being the young, hungry prospect in the division against the aged guy, you can't be 40 in bantamweight. You just can't. And I think we're gonna see Father Time really on display here. And I think that John Castaneda, despite Douglas Silva de Andrade being 29-6, having 4 losses via decision, only one coming by KO, TKO, and one coming by way of submission. I think that Castaneda can work towards a finish here. I got to tell you, Jason, I really do. I think that Castaneda can work towards the finish. And I really think that the grappling is the difference maker. I think that his jiu-jitsu is threatening. He's smooth on the mat. I just looked and double checked, and Douglas Silva de Andrade lost to Rob Font via guillotine. Granted, that's back in 2017, but Rob Font via guillotine, that is such a head scratcher. And you've only been finished twice, and once was to Rob Font by submission. And I haven't played that fight back, but my guess would be that he wasn't enjoying the boxing. He was not enjoying the boxing coming his way from Rob Font, which resulted in probably a poor shot, which resulted in him getting submitted. And I think I could see the same thing happening here. John Castaneda is going to be putting hands on Douglas Silva de Andrade. Douglas Silva de Andrade was having a very, very hard time against Sergey Morozov years back. Ultimately came from behind and pulled off an excellent victory. But I think that we could see John Castaneda pick up a much-needed statement win here. And he's coming from a gym that I am pretty confident in for this division. So I like John Castaneda a lot. I like John Castaneda. Him losing to Daniel Marcos doesn't really bother me at all. I'm going to be picking John Castaneda. My model says that this is going to be a close fight if it goes 15 minutes, which I definitely think everybody's going to be on Castaneda or Douglas Silva de Andrade to win via decision. But I think a sneaky path to victory is Castaneda via sub. So give me Castaneda inside the distance.
Yeah, I like Castaneda in this spot as well, but I can understand why people maybe want to take the little value play there on Andrade. Next up, we got Danny Silva taking on Lucas Almeida. Almeida placed 180 betting underdog minus 224. Silva, who is $8,600 DK, $17 on FanDuel. Almeida, $7,600 DK and $12 on FanDuel. When you look at Danny Silva, won his UFC debut against Josh Kulabau via split decision in March of last year. He was scheduled to fight back in August. However, he ended up withdrawing from that matchup. Almeida 2-2 in the UFC, coming off a decision win back there in June, and both of his UFC losses have come via stoppage, Pete.
Yeah, I'm not a Lucas Almeida guy, and I got to tell you, because I know a ton of people in the community are going to be backing Lucas Almeida this week. I'm just not a fan of Lucas Almeida. I don't think that he's good, and I could be completely wrong in this matchup. But I know that Danny Silva is going to go out there and he's going to push a pace. He pushed a pretty big pace on the Contender Series, and was even able to pick up a decision over Josh Kulabau. I think Kulabau is way better than Lucas Almeida, and a lot of people think Kulabau sucks all of a sudden. Kulabau beat Melsik Baghdasaryan, so what are we talking about here? I think that Danny Silva, his best path to victory is testing the horrific takedown defense of Lucas Almeida, and this is a situation where, like, from betting last week, I picked Rob Font to pull off an upset, as you did, over Gene Matsumoto. Very, very close fight. But I said that the best path to victory was for Matsumoto to utilize his takedowns. And even though he's not the best takedown artist out there, he was able to find, seven takedowns against Rob Font. And I played those takedown props on DraftKings Sportsbook. And I plan on doing the same thing here against Danny Silva. For Danny Silva against Lucas Almeida. I think that there is some high takedown upside here. And I also think that there's some sneaky submission upside too. And I know Danny Silva is a pretty talented jiu-jitsu practitioner, good boxing. Danny Silva's hittable. And if you look at the striking stats, like, it's a negative differential between his strikes landed per minute and his strikes absorbed per minute. If you want to use that math, then so does John Castaneda. Then John Castaneda has a negative striking differential too. So I'm not going to be buying that as a reason why I'm avoiding Danny Silva. I think that the 8,600 price tag is one of the most optimal out there, and it's something that I want to get ahead of, especially when I know the underdog of Lucas Almeida, 15-3, is going to be pretty popular, I would think. He has power. Yes, he finished Michael Trezano, which really surprised the hell out of me. And he beat Timothy Kawamba, who I think is solid, but nothing particularly special. I think Danny Silva, he could go out there and put together an excellent performance. So I'm going to predict that's what's going to happen. And I could be dead wrong, but I just do not trust the takedown defense of Lucas Almeida. And I think even on the feet, he's susceptible to getting hurt, rocked, and stunned. So I think that we could see Silva go out there, push a pace against Lucas Almeida, pick up 3+ takedowns if it goes 15 minutes. So yeah, I'll be taking those takedown props, and I'll be picking Danny Silva to beat Lucas Almeida here at 8,600.
Yeah, this is one of those fights where I want to see where the ownership is on Danny Silva in comparison to fighters who are in that similar price range. Maybe see if I can get a little bit of leverage. And that's where, like in single entry lineups, it could be Danny Silva, maybe a guy that becomes a core play for me just because of maybe where the ownership ultimately ends up lying there. Next up, we got a female matchup between Andrea Lee and JJ Aldrich. Aldrich is a minus 210 betting favorite, plus 175 for Lee, who is 7,500 DK, $13 on FanDuel. Aldrich, $8,700 DK, and $16 on FanDuel. Andrea Lee has lost 5 in a row. Her last win was back in 2021 against Cynthia Calvillo, coming off a split decision loss against Montana De La Rosa back there in June. By the way, out of her 13 fights, 11 have gone the distance. All of her UFC losses are via decision. Aldrich on the other side, 9-6 in the UFC, 12 of her 15 fights in the promotion have gone the distance. She is coming off a decision loss against Veronica Cardi in May. Simply put, 95% chances. Well, maybe 98% chances of things going 15 minutes.
Yeah, I think that everybody's going to stay away from Andrea Lee. I mean, she's got more L's on that game log than anything I've ever seen. I mean, she's 2-8 in her last 10. Hasn't really materialized into anything of what she was on the regional scene. And I do think that she has been robbed in some fights. I do think that she has shown that she's pretty tough in certain matchups, especially when she get the takedowns going. I think that her grappling is probably her best skill set that's underutilized. Her wrestling's okay. Her jiu-jitsu skills are pretty sneaky. I mean, we haven't had an armbar from guard or women's MMA knockout in quite some time, it seems. So perhaps this is going to be an armbar from guard situation, and I hope to be on the right side of it. But the likelihood is that this is 15 minutes. I would have to say that Andrea Lee might be one of the most under-owned fighters on the entire card. Probably the least owned, one of the most least owned fighters on the card. And I think it's just going to be from people box score watching and people thinking JJ Aldrich is something super, super special. This is the same girl that was losing to Na Liang, and Na Liang is a round one fighter, good takedowns, but she's like the Ricardo Ramos of women's MMA. She quits, she breaks under pressure, but she was having her way with JJ Aldrich up until Aldrich reversed her, and then was able to find a very, very rare finish. But I remember I had JJ Aldrich inside the distance, and man, it did not come easy at all. And it should have came a lot easier than that. And I have not forgotten about that because I think JJ Aldrich is probably always overvalued. I think she's solid everywhere. She's a southpaw. She's an accurate striker, has a good left hand, tends to defend takedowns decently well, has started to implement takedowns in her own right. Back against Erin Blanchfield, she took down Blanchfield twice, defended some takedowns, but ultimately got subbed. I just think that JJ Aldrich is okay. And this line is totally because Andrea Lee is 2-8 in her last 10, and on a crazy, crazy streak of 5 losses in a row. And is the line warranted? Yeah, probably. But if I look at the stats and I look at the data, JJ Aldrich just doesn't throw enough sometimes. She really just doesn't throw enough sometimes. And I think that we could be in a situation where if it's a close fight, the more active fighter is going to be Andrea Lee. She is the more active fighter, and it's not necessarily by a significant margin, but she, based on history, will throw more, will attempt more takedowns. So it's like, I don't know, man. I think if everybody's off of a fighter, it kind of makes me want to play them. I think you have to pick JJ Aldrich to win the fight. But I'll be playing Andrea Lee, especially if it's nobody wants to play her, just because I thought she did decently well against Montana De La Rosa, 51.8. What is her headspace like? Does she even want to be there? Does she even really want to fight anymore? but she could also go out there and really want to make a statement too. So I don't necessarily know. I think that Andrea Lee's in an interesting spot, and for a fighter that lands with more significant strikes per minute and attempts more significant strikes per minute, attempts more takedowns per minute, I'm gonna have some Andrea Lee, and it could be a terrible decision, but I'll be picking Andrea Lee in more DFS lineups than I will for JJ Aldrich. But I think a straight up pick, it's JJ Aldrich.
What do you think the over 2.5 rounds is?
Probably minus 350.
You're way too low.
What is it?
Two books have lines out right now. Bet Rivers minus 670.
Oh God.
And Betway has it minus 549. Fight goes the distance over at DraftKings Sportsbook minus 450.
I don't think anybody's going to play the damn fight. And if nobody's playing it, I may want to play it. And I could be dead wrong, but hell, I'll try it.
Yeah, I mean, I get that thought process. I feel like if you're going to play it, you have to. It's either Andrea Lee or move on. I just what is the path to JJ Aldrich being optimal at 8,700? That's what scares the crap out of me about this matchup.
Yeah, I mean, she's got to go out there and try to become Miss Takedown out there. But even when she had 4 takedowns against Courtney Casey, she only scored 80 fantasy points. So I think JJ Aldrich is a pretty easy fade for me. DFS, it's Andrea Lee or move on.
Yeah. Next up, we got Charles Johnson taking on Ramazan. Temirov is plus 100, minus 120 for Johnson, who's 7,800 on DK, $15 on FanDuel. Temirov, 8,400 on DK, $15 on FanDuel. Charles Johnson, 7-inch reach advantage in this one. One of the big notes with him is he moved his training to Orlando from St. Louis after his last matchup, now training there at Fusion XL. Coming off a decision win against Sumadarji back there in October. He's won 4 in a row. 3 of those wins have gone the distance. 8 of his 10 UFC fights have gone the distance. Temirov, 2-0 in the UFC. Both those wins have come by first-round TKO. His last 5 wins overall have come by TKO KO, and he is coming off a win back in October against CJ Vergara, Pete.
Yeah, I think this is the most pivotal fight on the slate, and I think that the underdog in Charles Johnson, next to Cody Brundage, will be the second or most owned underdog on the slate. I think that everybody's going to want to get behind Charles Johnson. I mean, he has a significant UFC edge, 10 UFC fights to Temirov's 1. Tends to be the A side in the striking in most matchups, is a lot longer and taller than Temirov in this matchup. So all the physicality advantages lie with Charles Johnson here. And I just wonder if it's a mistake that everybody's in love with this Charles Johnson underdog pick, just because I actually think that Temirov has the ability to hurt and finish Charles Johnson. And now hear me out. I know it sounds crazy. Charles Johnson has yet to be finished. Okay? Yet to be finished in the UFC, yet to be finished in his career in general. But not too long ago, he was facing off against another hot prospect. And let me give credit to Charles Johnson for all the difficult fights that he's accepted throughout his UFC tenure. Okay? He has fought a very, very tough line of competition. But I don't necessarily say that's the reason why he's going to win this fight, because in certain matchups, I think he's shown some holes. Against Azat Maxim, a guy that was 15-0 coming into the UFC, he almost had Charles Johnson out of there twice, maybe 3 times in round 1. He hit and knocked down Charles Johnson. He hit and knocked him down again. They didn't count it as a knockdown. And then he had him against the cage looking almost like the end was near. And Azat Maxim, I don't think, is some crazy power puncher in comparison to what Temirov possesses. Maxim has 4 TKO wins. Maxim's very good. But when he touched Charles Johnson on the chin, I did not like what I saw. And it's no fault of Charles Johnson. It's just like he got caught clean. And then he was trying to recover, and it just wasn't happening. I think that's what's going to happen this week, and I could be dead wrong. You could have Charles Johnson winning late in rounds 2 or rounds 3. Most likely, the best path to victory is him besting his opponent over 15 minutes. Look what he did against Joshua Van. Look what he's done throughout his whole career. But a lot of people forget Joshua Van was beating him. And then Charles Johnson came from behind and scored that excellent knockout, which I didn't necessarily see happening. And we have Charles Johnson finding his power lately, knocking down his previous 3 fighters, Jake Hadley, Joshua Van, and Sumu Derji. I just don't think that he can play that game. Yes, he's a tall striker in this matchup. He's giant for the division, but I think his long strikes will get him caught here. I think that we're going to see Temirov hit him with an overhand right over his jab. I really do. I think that there is a spot for Temirov to finish Charles Johnson. This fight is a necessity for your lineups. I have to tell you, I think it's a necessity. You have to roster it one way or another. I think I'm back in Temirov, Jason, and I think that the masses will be back in Charles Johnson, and I get it. I could be just buying the hype a little bit or buying into the power of Temirov. Clearly, the more tested fighter is Charles Johnson. But I like what I'm seeing from optics, and I'm going to say that Temirov knocks out Charles Johnson. And I think that's a bold call. I don't think many people are predicting it, but I actually think that's what happens here. So give me Temirov here at 8,400. And one way or another, I think that you need to roster this bout, whether it's 8,400 Temirov or 7,800 Charles Johnson.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the questions I would have is what happens if this thing gets into the late second, third round? Well, where is Temirov at, and is he able to handle it? How does he counter this huge reach disadvantage he has in this one? But, a very great point that you bring up there could be, if looking at ownership, Johnson may just have so much ownership because that's going to be one of the favorite underdogs this week that you can find a little leverage on the field there. There are opening matchups, a female matchup. You got Montana De La Rosa taking on Luana Carolina. Carolina, my 150 betting favorite, my plus 125 for De La Rosa, 7,900 on DK, $14 on FanDuel. Carolina, 8,300 on DK, and $15 on FanDuel. Montana De La Rosa, 6-5-2 in the UFC. She's coming off a split decision win against Andrea Lee. Notable losses in the UFC include Tatiana Soares, Macy Barber, Viviana Araujo. Luana Carolina, 6-3 in the UFC. 5 of those wins have come by decision. She has won 3 in a row and is coming off a decision win in her last matchup against Lucy Pudova.
The most exciting fight on the card. I'm very interested. No. We got Montana De La Rosa and Luana Carolina. I got to tell you, I don't know which fight's going to be worse. Luana Carolina and Montana De La Rosa or JJ Aldrich and Andrea Lee. I really want to know. We should put that as a poll. Jason, put that as a poll in our whether it's the chat or if you can do that on the comment section. Or how about you guys comment and let us know which fight's going to be better between those two amazing women's MMA bouts. The way I see this fight is Luana Carolina is pretty long for the division. I think that she's the A side in the striking here. Montana De La Rosa will try to utilize her boxing enough to get in close, attempt her takedowns, and utilize her pretty solid jiu-jitsu. If she's able to get an advantageous position over Luana Carolina, I think that a submission is super, super live. The issue is I just don't think that she's able to. Like, Luana Carolina's built a career off of defending takedowns. Luana Carolina made Lupita Godinez struggle in the takedown department. So I don't see why Montana De La Rosa will have success in the takedown department when Lupita Godinez was struggling to have success in the takedown department. I think that Luana Carolina is not the greatest fighter by any means, but limiting Lupita Godinez to 2 takedowns of 15 attempts, forcing her opponent to stand up and trade with her, I think it's going to result in a Luana Carolina decision. So a fight that I'm not really interested in. I could see why if you're going to play aside, maybe you're going to back the hopes of Montana De La Rosa getting a takedown and working towards a submission finish. I mean, we saw Ariane Lipsky finish Luana Carolina quite some time ago with a knee bar. That's some little MMA mathy. I'm not into that. But I think that I think that Luana Carolina will keep it on the feet, and I think she'll best Montana De La Rosa over 15 minutes.
Was just putting together the poll.
Oh, nice. Yes. I mean, what's a better fight? What's going to be a better UFC fight? Andrea Lee, JJ Aldrich, or Luana Carolina, Montana De La Rosa? I don't know.
Yeah, like which fight, if you had to bet one fight, which one would you bet?
I don't know. I mean, and then you got the amazing co-main event between Julian Marquez and Cody Brundage. I mean, that's a 3-way tie for shit. So I don't know. It's a weird card, but there's like Temirov being second fight of the night makes no sense to me at all.
Yeah, I mean, you got to look at it. This is an Apex card, and this is You talk about the tiers of UFC events. This is the low tier of a UFC event. What we're getting here, but let's get right to our straight up fight picks. We're getting some listener questions. Main event. I'll go to Manel Kape.
Straight up picks. I'll go Manel Kape.
Man, co-main event. Oh God.
I'll go Julian Marquez.
I'll go the underdog Cody Brundage, but man, don't feel good either way. Don't feel good either way. Give me underdog number 2, Nasrat Haqparast.
I get it. I'm gonna go Estevan Ribovics though.
Underdog number 3, Hyder Amil.
William Gomis for me.
Danny Barlow.
Danny Barlow.
Pinto.
Mario Pinto.
Chepe Mariscal.
Chepe Mariscal.
John Castaneda. Danny Silva. JJ Aldrich.
Straight up pick JJ Aldrich.
Underdog number 4, Charles Johnson.
Okay, I'm gonna stick to my guns with Temirov.
And I will go Luana Carolina in the opening matchup.
Luana Carolina as well. Yeah.
Get to some questions from Discord. First off, value plays underneath 8K and a core 3 on DraftKings. I think when you talk about value plays, I would throw Almabayev in that one just because of the price point in terms of that one. Other ones I feel good about underneath 8K. Charles Johnson, but I think he's going to be very popular at 7,800. Brundage is going to be popular, but you're not going to feel good either way.
This poll is great. I've seen it fluctuate. It's awesome. I hope it stays for. We got to figure out. It'd be nice if it could stay up throughout the entire week for everybody to see it and vote. But yeah.
Yeah, we'll throw it in the comment section for people who are watching or listening after the fact on that one. Core 3 on DraftKings. It's a tough one for me. I would probably say, for me, Danny Barlow, John Castaneda, Charles Johnson.
And I'm on the other side of that. I'm going to go Danny Barlow, John Castaneda, and Temirov. I like it.
Yeah. Sam's got his usual questions. Let me just pull these up here real quick. Top best plays. I will say this. I do like a lot of the 9,000 options. Barlow would probably be number 1 for me. Then I'd probably go.
Chepe?
Yeah, Chepe would be 2 for me.
Really?
I would go Pinto 3, Kape 4, Ribovics 5.
That's crazy. Really? Is it just the difference of $200 that makes Chepe not your number 1?
Yeah, because I also kind of think about it as like, if just the price point and how I develop the rest of my roster.
I think that the guy could be almost $10,000, and I want to play him in this matchup. But
I
got
say
Chepe
this:
1.
William Gomis at 8,800, depending on what ownership is, could be an interesting play, especially if he does go to the takedown route. If you tell me he's in that, say 25 to 28% ownership, he does become an interesting play for me.
Okay.
If he's above 30, 35, that's where I get kind of concerned about.
Okay.
Top inside the distance fighters. I would look at the co-main event. Barlow, Pinto, Lane, either one of them. Even though if Lane probably wins, he probably just wrestle F's him the whole fight. I would throw Danny Silva in there. And I think you had to throw Temirov in there just because of his history.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, I totally agree with that.
Favorite live dogs. For me, my top 2 would be Johnson and Haqparast.
Yeah, I think that Johnson and Brundage are like 1A, 1B as far as like I think Haqparast could do it in a competitive 15 minutes. I just worry about him getting finished. But yeah, I think that Johnson and Brundage are 1A, 1B pretty clearly.
Top punt plays. Almabayev's got to be the top punt play.
I don't even consider. I mean, yeah, like by price, it's punt play, but I
Yeah.
think it's a core for me because it's. So yeah, I probably put Austen Almabayev as a core. I mean, even in a loss, man, I think that he can do a lot.
Yeah.
I really do. I mean, like 7,200, it's nothing for flyweights. They might attempt 10 takedowns a round.
Yeah. Top leverage plays. I think this is simple, Pete. De La Rosa, Carolina, Lee, Aldrich.
Yeah,
You're not gonna feel great. You're not gonna feel great about it, but those are going to be the leverage fights of the card. You're gonna be able to find something there.
Totally agree.
Best decision odds. Man, well, the female matchups. First off, they're going the distance. I mean, let's just get it. I mean,
armbar from guard.
I mean, look, you could probably parlay those two fight go the distance, and you're still probably minus 350.
At least, probably.
Yeah. Favorite parlays. Man, the problem is the fighters you like the most are just such huge favorites. I mean, you know, like I mean, even though when I put my sheet together, he was minus 575. I'm not sure if it's gone up more. You know, Chepe, I think could be a very core parlay piece. You know, and then like if you're looking to kind of, if I was going to build a 3-teamer that I felt confident in, I'd probably go Chepe, Castaneda, and Barlow.
I like that. I think that I'd probably go Pinto over Barlow just because of the questions of the ground game. But I think those three together, or those four potentially together, make sense.
Well, my only concern is just what we've seen with prospects and how they fared in the UFC in 2025. Jason P. Special, I have zero interest in taking the first fight of the night. Zero interest.
It's De La Rosa, right?
De La Rosa and Carolina, yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm not doing it.
And then we don't have an 8,000 fight this week.
Thank God. Let me tell you real quick. I thought the co-main event was going to be 8,200, 8,000. So I mean, like between Marquez and Brundage, I think that's the most coin flippable fight we've seen in quite some time. So for Marquez to be a significant favorite doesn't really make the most sense in the world. But they both they're both coin flip fighters.
That could be, you talk about live betting a fight. That could be the perfect live betting a fight. If Cody Brundage gets off to an incredible start, I'm on that Hard Rock app just saying, what am I getting on money on Julian Marquez?
Locked and loaded, baby. I'm ready. Exactly.
Top captains and MVPs. I think you have to look at the main event just because of flyweight action. Likely goes 25 minutes. Could have a lot of takedown attempts, so you might be able to rack up a ton of points there. William Gomis, I think, could be an interesting MVP and captain play just because of the takedown upside there. The price point in Chepe as a captain is going to be insane.
I think that that's what I would do, though. I mean, like Ricardo Ramos gives me Herbert Burns vibes, and I think like it's like the best matchup for Chepe Mariscal. So I'll be putting Chepe in there. I really would.
All right, Road to Manchester Series over under 5.5. I was way wrong last week. I mean, hell, we had what seven just on the prelims. I would say, I'm gonna say
under.
Yeah, I'm gonna say under.
Yeah, I'm gonna say under.
It's kind of hard when you have 13 fights and you can already look at 2 fights right off the top and say, yeah, those are going the distance.
Yeah, I think under though.
Yeah.
There's no crowd. I think the crowd amplifies finishes. I've always said that.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. Hop over to the score. Make sure you get any questions that come in there. Well, not really seeing anything over there, but yeah, if you do got any questions, you can hit those up in the score. You hit them up on the YouTube chat as well. Leave a comment below on there. Right now, our poll: which fight would be better? Montana Rosa and Carolina, 55% to 45%.
It's close, dude. It's mayhem right now. We need that in our chat, guys. Thank you so much for tuning into another edition of Fight HQ. Jason and I truly appreciate it. Really help us get to 2,000 subscribers by telling your friends to subscribe to the channel, commenting something, anything, even if it's a W down in the comment section really does help boost our video out there to the public. You're probably already a part of our Fight HQ free Discord in the link below. Take advantage of the offer that Stochastic has given all of our members if you're interested in having the simulations and the data for MMA DFS. But like always, try to get us over 100 likes on the video. Can't wait. Hopefully, I'm due for a win, man, and I'm feeling really good this week. So I'm feeling really, really good this week, and I think Jason and I are both due for a win. So good luck to everybody, and we'll talk down the next one.
I'm not feeling good about this.
I'm feeling good. I don't know why. There's some bad cards that I don't feel good about at all. Like I had like a kind of a shitty feeling about last week's card. This week's card, I'm feeling damn good. I think it's because I'm pivoting from what I think the masses are doing a little bit. I hope I'm not getting too cute with it, but me making a stand and planting my flag on Temirov, my flag plants have been pretty bad historically. But I think my flag plant of Temirov over Johnson could really, really flip the slate on its head.
Yeah, last week wasn't a bad week for me. What kind of really hurt me was Walker only getting 54 points in that fight. That was one that, man. I hope he takes some time before his next fight. I'm gonna just say that.
Tell me you can't see that same type of fight happening in the Brundage and Marquez fight. Neither one of them became optimal. The damage,
that was one of those fights where I wish I could have heard Saif Saud the whole fight.
Yeah.
Because when they did go to his corner, you could see the frustration he was having of like, man, go for it, go for it, go for it, go for it.
Still got the win.
Because he had a massive speed advantage in that one. Massive speed advantage.
Oh, yeah. The takedown attempts tired him out, man. I mean, it was a really close fight. Julian looked good.
By the way, the beginning of the Rob Font fight. A little dirty? With the glove tap and he just throws the punch?
I had an issue like that happen too, where you shake off the glove touch and you go out there and your idea is forward. So you touch gloves and you want to get right in their face and they don't take a step back. So it's like you were thinking that they were going to take a step back and you're getting right into action, but they take a step forward. And then it's just like, I didn't think it was necessarily dirty, intentionally dirty, but I think it was definitely, it didn't look great. And I don't think like he meant it to happen. It's just he's trying to touch gloves and close that gap immediately. But they're both forward fighters. So that's what happens. You know what I mean? And yeah. I don't know. It just what's he going to touch gloves, move forward, and then get hit by him? You know, it's just, I don't know. It's fighting, dude. But
I will say
it was just a little unfortunate.
One of the clips I saw yesterday on X that I thought was really interesting was Jason Herzog was on with Henry Cejudo, and
I don't know if
Herzog admitted he should have taken a point. You know my big I don't have an issue with whether or not he took a point there. But you know my bigger issue is when they restarted the fight, Song Yadong's fingers were still out.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you the issue. I don't like the fighter publicly talking to the referee on his platform. I don't like that. I almost think that referees, and I don't think we'll ever have it, should be facing the media. I think that they should face the media rather than facing platforms of fighters.
I know for the most part, the commission heads do not want referees and judges talking to the media.
I would rather them talk to the media than talk to the fighter on their own podcast.
What I would like to see happen is that the UFC basically, when they know what credential media members are going to be there, they name one media member as a pool reporter. And at the end of the fight card, they can go talk to the referees. They can talk to the judges, and then they distribute those quotes. That's what happened. That's what happens in the NFL. There is one reporter that is dedicated that they can go down after the game is over, and get ask questions to the head official, and then they distribute the quotes to the rest of the media. that's something I would like to see happen. I think the one thing about kind of how that whole situation played out is the fact of I don't blame Henry for, saying I'm done. I don't blame. I mean, you gotta look at your long-term health, man. He has a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old. The only thing I will say is, like, when the fighter says I can't see about 20 times.
Well,
Once around is like once a fighter says they can't see and either the referee or doctor hears it, the fight is over. It's over.
Yeah. Well, we know as fighters, you got certain things you can't say. You can't say that.
You
can't say that. So if a guy says that, he wants the fight to be done. It's simple.
Yeah, the fight's over.
It's simple. You want the fight to be done regardless of whether you win or you lose. If you say that, it's over. Because we've seen guys rub it out, and we've seen guys like try to fight through it and lie and say, no, I'm good. And you see the complete opposite of the spectrum, which is like the true type of gritty fighter. But a guy that's already made it, a guy that's already got 7 zeros in the bank account, the guys that, has achieved UFC gold, Olympic gold, like, it ain't worth it at that point for that person. But if Estevan Ribovics gets stabbed in the eyes this weekend, I guarantee you he's going to lie and say he can see. And he's going to do everything he can to fight through. It's just where they're at in their careers. Are you on the up? Have you made it? Or are you on the decline? And I think there's a lot to be learned from that situation, from commissions, from fighters, from Henry Cejudo personally. I don't think that him returning was probably the best thing. Him leaving out on top as a double champ was the best thing he could have done. Because now he's come back and he's totally tainted his legacy. Totally.
Well, I think what's happened is the division's passed him by. You're out for 3 years. We could name the fighters, okay? Like, I think one of the perfect examples of a division passing a fighter is Ronda Rousey. When she came in, her skill set, but all of a sudden, the division caught up. They passed her, and we all saw how it kind of went out. Also, the thing that we did not learn until the fight started last week is the UFC has scrapped the new gloves, and they've gone back to the old gloves.
Good.
And of course, people note that after the prelims of every fight hitting a fish, like,
Yeah, I mean, come on. There's something there. Luana Carolina beats Ronda Rousey in 2025. No, just kidding. Maybe.
Bro, could Ronda Rousey beat anyone in the top 15 right now?
No, I mean,
I don't think
I'd
so.
have to look at a list, but I don't think many.
No, the division passed her by. It happens in so many divisions, and it was, as someone who was a Song Yudong backer in DFS, I was like, bitch.
Yeah,
because I as that fight was going on, I'm like, this is not going well for Henry Cejudo. It's not going well. And of course, Dana White after the fact says, yeah, I don't want to see that fight again.
I don't blame him. I mean, Dana's right. I mean,
regardless. Well, I also wonder how much of that is he's just pissed that he wouldn't continue fighting.
You got to think though, these guys, the promoter has to pay these guys. Mm-hmm. So when you are frustrated with the results, you're paying this guy hundreds of thousands of dollars for that. It ain't worth the aggravation.
Yeah. I mean, I think if they give Cejudo another fight, it's going to be against a young, up and coming fighter. You forget Cejudo is 38 years old, and here's if you're Henry Cejudo. If you continue fighting, it is your future Michael Bisping with Michael Bisping's eye.
Yeah, it ain't even that bad. Michael Bisping had one eye, but I don't know. I think it's a little, he got poked, but he got poked in the corner of the eye.
Well, he got poked in both eyes.
Yeah, but
I mean, come on, bro. Like,
no, I mean, I don't know. I'm not like, yes, it was an eye poke, but I think there was some milk there.
Yeah, I mean, I think the bigger question going forward is, will we see commissions give referees more of a stance of, we need to start taking points, and if that starts happening in 3-round fights, we're going to see draws go up dramatically.
Yeah, I like it. I mean, we get warnings in the back. Your first warning is in the back, and yet you get 2 or 3 more warnings when the fight happens. So my friends have always said it. Grab the cage. Do whatever, because you ain't getting a point taken. Because it's the truth.
Yeah, when's the last time you've seen a fighter get taken a point for grabbing the cage?
Because the idea is in right. The point deduction of a cage should happen. But for the eye pokes and the groin shots, they're unintentional. So unless they're intentional fouls, you're not going to receive the point deduction unless it's a repeated offense. So now with the warning in the back and the 2 occurrences or 3 occurrences in the fight, you just poked this guy in the eye, kicked him in the nuts twice, you know what I mean? And now you are at an advantage. And it's like, unintentional or not, I almost think like I do agree that point deduction should happen. But I mean, we'll have to see some transformation in the rule set in order for that to happen.
I think it was Walker and Minifield where each of them had a foul, and I forget if I think Herzog might have been the referee in that one. It was either him or Keith Peterson. By the way, Keith Peterson has clearly lost a ton of weight. But and they're like, and who the referee was like, he goes, all right, you got one, you guys are even.
I mean, totally. I get that. Yep.
Yeah, it's It's
we'll have to see if we got any exciting stuff happen this weekend. I'm excited for the card. I'm excited to make some money. I'm excited to see the community make some money, and excited to see if I'm correct on some of these fight predictions or wrong. So thanks again for joining us, guys. We really, really do appreciate it. Jason, you are the man. You're the best in the business, and looking forward to growing this channel with you.
By the way, coming up in an hour live on my Facebook and on Twitter, I'll have the MMA Report podcast for myself and Daniel. We'll talk about everything going on in the world of MMA. Of course, we now have a new co-main event for UFC 313 next week. Rafael Fiziev returning from injury. Rematches Justin Gaethje, Arman Tsarukyan. According to Gaethje, say he turned the fight down. Tsarukyan coming out saying, no, I did not turn the fight down. So we'll talk about that, everything going on in the world of MMA. So we'll talk to you next week right here on the Fight HQ podcast.